Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
Now, I joined the Labour Party when I was 15, and I did it because I saw politics as the pursuit of social justice, the endeavour of opportunity for all, irrespective of your situation when you came into this world. And it's so wrong that still so many young people in this country are denied the education that I was fortunate enough to get at Southgate Comprehensive and Oxford University. I'm in politics to change this. It's what drives me. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. So what I want to address today is how a future Labour government would work to deliver an excellent place for every child in every school. I want to set out 3 radical reforms. First of all, where a school freedom promotes higher standards, we will extend those freedoms to all schools. So if a freedom that is currently afforded to an academy is serving to drive up standards, that freedom should be available to all state-funded schools. A school should not have to change its status in order to earn permission from the government to innovate. Secondly, nobody cares more about a school than the community that the school serves. Therefore, we want to deliver a radical devolution of power from Whitehall. It is neither feasible nor is it desirable for thousands of schools to be accountable only to the Secretary of State in the Department for Education. I want local communities to have a bigger say about education in their area. And thirdly, we want to ensure that every school plays its part to raise standards across their area and meet the needs of their community. Schools working together in collaboration, a proven recipe for success. Networked schools in a networked world with no school left behind. That, I think, is the key to raising standards across the country as a whole. So looking ahead, our starting point is an education system that I think is all too often talked down by politicians, and in particular, talked down by the current Secretary of State. Of course, there are huge, huge challenges, but I think we start from a position of strength with our school system in this country, and I think that's where Michael Gove gets it so badly wrong. He has invested so much political capital into talking down the education system and talking down the people who work in it. He's lost sight of the fact that actually the most important people, if we're going to raise standards across education, are those who are working in the schools and classrooms across our country, the professionals who are the true enablers of promise. Now, of course, there are problems in our school system, but this is simply not the way to deal with them. He tells us that decisions on schools are best made directly by central government, not the communities they serve, that somehow schools operate best as islands and that it's no problem having teachers who don't have qualified teacher status. I think he's wrong on all 3 counts. He also says, look to other countries, and he says, look to Finland, look to Shanghai. And I think it's worth us doing that because, of course, we can learn from other countries around the world. But I think he draws precisely the wrong lessons from some of those other jurisdictions. Typically, what they have is schools working together in partnership, communities that are empowered to support and challenge their local schools, and crucially, a high-status, high-morale teaching profession. So yes, I do want to learn from the best schools systems around the world. And I want to do that so that we can bring order to the chaos that Michael Gove is creating in our school system. I want to put an end to a fragmented and divisive system and ensure that every school can excel so that every child has the opportunity of a great education. Now, we know that giving schools more freedom over how they teach and how they run and organise their schools can help to raise standards. Innovation excites. It can uncover new ideas and breathe life into the system. Innovation challenges the historic inheritances that mean schools do things that way simply because they always have done. So why should we deny these freedoms to thousands of schools? All schools should have them, not just academies and free schools. A school simply shouldn't have to change its structure to gain these freedoms. If we're to have a one-nation education system, freedom should be granted to all schools and innovation encouraged across the system. So Labour will give all schools the same freedom over the curriculum that academies currently enjoy, whilst continuing to insist, as indeed academies it's insisted upon, that all schools teach a core curriculum of English, maths and science. Academies say that freedom to innovate in their curriculum has given their teachers a new sense of confidence and professionalism. All young people should benefit from the positive impact this brings, trusting the teachers to get on with the job. And I would say that where a maintained school wants, for example, to offer a longer school term so that it can offer extra classes to improve results, why should they have to jump through a series of bureaucratic hoops when academies can, working with parents, change their term dates to deliver better education? So giving all schools freedom to raise standards is a crucial feature of a one-nation system that values all schools. But while freedoms can play a key part in raising standards, we should never fall into the trap of equating structural change with school improvement. That is one of the things that Michael Gove does. He plays a numbers game about how many free schools and academies there are, as if by changing the type of school, magically standards will improve. If only life were that simple. Contrary to the rhetoric of the government, free schools and academies are not a panacea for school improvement. We are seeing that they can and do sometimes underperform, just like any other type of school. I think there is a key problem here, which is that the Academies and Free Schools programme is a programme overseen simply by central government. Local communities, local authorities don't have a clear role, for example, in monitoring and challenging the performance of academies at a local level. Now, I was involved when we started the Academies programme 10 years ago, and this centralised system perhaps was viable when we had a small and focused academy programme. But you cannot run thousands of schools from Whitehall. And as the numbers of these schools increases, underperformance and mismanagement are inevitably going to happen in some of them, and these things are being spotted and acted upon much too late. Under this government, local oversight only exists for maintained schools. I think we need stronger local oversight for all schools so that if a school is struggling, if a school is underperforming, that is spotted early, so that local support is on hand to drive up standards, and so that schools have an open and clear relationship with their community. Evidence shows us that local challenge is important if we're going to improve schools. I mentioned Shanghai, which came top of the 2009 PISA tables in reading, in maths and in science. In Shanghai, there is strong oversight at the local level, with district leaders working with the schools to spread best practice, and they see it as central to school improvement. We know that too many schools still are coasting, and yet because Michael Gove is fixated on his numbers game with academy conversions and free school creations, he doesn't have a credible plan to drive up standards in schools once they have become academies. We need to demonstrate that we put high school standards over and above any dogma regarding school structures. Frankly, that's why Labour created the Sponsored Academies programme in the first place. And let me reaffirm today that if sponsored academy status is the best solution for a failing school, then that should happen. But Labour will not tolerate failing academies or failing free schools. They should be held to exactly the same high standard as other schools, and any that fail should of course be given the chance to turn things round, but they should be challenged and in the end, if necessary, new sponsorship and new leadership imposed. This is why today I'm asking David Blunkett to lead a review into the local oversight of schools. David will look at the role of the local authority and how we can better harness the positive benefits of interplay between central and local government. He will also recommend how we best give local communities a bigger say when new schools are being created. Labour believes strongly that parents have an important role to play, both in calling for and in setting up new schools. So as part of David Blunkett's review, he'll be setting out the best way to encourage parent academies. Labour started the Academies programme to bring outside energy and expertise into the school system. We want to extend that to parents. He will also examine how we can harness the enthusiasm that exists within local communities and use it to best effect to create more good schools. Some of the best schools have been set up by brilliant teachers like Peter Hyman's School 21 and Patricia Sauter's Woodpecker Primary School in Enfield. And we have fantastic head teachers in maintained schools, like Tim Sheriff, who leads the outstanding Westfield School in Wigan, which I had the privilege to visit a couple of weeks ago. What all of these schools have in common is that they tackle disadvantage, they raise standards, and they provide the extra places where those places are needed, and they do it whether they're maintained schools or academies. And I want to see more schools like that, more Westfields and more Woodpeckers. So our vision, Labour's vision, for creating new schools is this. It's one in which local communities and parents have a greater say. It's one in which priority is given to setting up new schools where they are most needed, starting with those areas that have a shortage of places. And it's one where we insist on high standards for our children with qualified teachers in every classroom. Above all, though, a vision that seeks to bind communities together, not to divide them. Under Michael Gove's Free Schools programme, he decides which schools open, he decides where they go, and he decides that even where local communities clearly don't want those schools. Under his policy, millions have been spent opening schools in areas with a surplus of places, including areas where the surplus of places are in schools that have been rated good or outstanding by Ofsted. In other parts of the country, children and parents face a shortage of places. Under Michael Gove's policy, increasing numbers of schools are able to employ unqualified teachers. When we know that the key to raising standards is the quality of teaching, I think it is fundamentally the wrong approach to take. But I think perhaps worst of all is that the free schools policy has become a symbol of ideology and division in our education system. In some parts of the country, it has set school against school, parent against parent. And that is why Labour will not continue with Michael Gove's free schools policy. Existing free schools and those in the pipeline will continue, but in future we need a better framework for creating new schools in terms of the vision that I've set out above today. So no school left behind. What does that mean? Schools working together, working in collaboration to spread excellence. In 2010, we used to hear a lot from Michael Gove about collaboration, but he's simply failed to deliver on the commitments set out in his own white paper, the 2010 white paper on schools. He promised in that paper to ensure that new academies supported other schools, but we know that nearly 2/3 of academies are not in such a partnership. The evidence on school improvement, both from home and abroad, demonstrates that partnerships, federations, relationships between schools are the key to raising teaching standards, enhancing leadership skills, and sharing best practice. Andreas Schleicher of the OECD argues very clearly that while more autonomous school systems are generally more successful than highly directed ones, there is a stronger correlation between collaborative culture and system success. The lowest performing schools in the OECD have autonomy without collaboration. We need both. When I was the Minister for Schools, I led a programme called the London Challenge. The London Challenge was about us saying that we would not tolerate the persistent underperformance that had led London to be one of the worst performing regions in the country. Within the space of a decade, London schools have been transformed. London now outperforms all other regions of England in secondary education. Why did this happen? I think it happened in no small part because of the focus on schools working together. Hard-edged partnership. Very often, when the language of collaboration and partnership is used, it is caricatured as somehow soft or cuddly as an option. I don't think anyone who was involved with the London Challenge could make that accusation. London Challenge advisors set clear and ambitious standards for schools, but they did it by working with heads and teachers to get buy-in. Where underperformance was identified, teachers would receive training and support from high-performing colleagues in other schools. There are great examples of school collaboration, not just here in London, but across the country. Let me pay tribute to the Bradford Secondary Schools Partnership that has brought together the secondary schools in Bradford to develop a rigorous system of performance review, effective school-to-school support, and school-led professional development. And in that partnership, they have maintained schools, they have academies, they have free schools. They come together to raise standards. Here there is an important role for government, central government and local government, as enablers of collaboration. That is why we would make it a requirement for all schools to partner with weaker schools as a condition for attaining an outstanding rating from Ofsted, taking forward the recommendation of the Academies Commission. I think academies have an important role to play here, and that is why I would put a greater emphasis on collaboration in academy funding agreements. Not new duties, but giving real teeth to existing responsibilities. Indeed, I want to make sure that new funding agreements for academies and the renewal of existing funding agreements are subject to these schools demonstrating a real commitment to playing their part in collaborating with other schools in their community. And part of that is about ensuring that every school is providing a fair system of admissions. The comprehensive ideal, but within a mixed economy of schools, is the challenge that we have to rise to. Research published by the Sutton Trust earlier this month reminds us of the scale of this challenge. The findings are very concerning, but they are nothing new. The proportion of pupils from low-income families at our top 500 comprehensive schools is less than half the national average. More significantly still, 95% of these top 500 comprehensive schools take fewer pupils on free school meals than their local average. We are seeing social selection continuing to play out in our system, and it worries me deeply. Now, I'm very clear this is not a new problem, and it is not exclusive to any particular type of school, but its prevalence is plain to see, and it needs to be confronted. That is why I would bring forward changes to the Schools Admissions Code, for example, to allow all schools to give priority to disadvantaged children, those eligible for the pupil premium, a provision that currently exists only for academies. I believe there's a strong case, too, for us to look again at the powers of the Office of the Schools Adjudicator, for us to ensure that both the letter and the spirit of the Admissions Code are being followed. I think the appeals process for academies is too opaque. I don't think most academies have anything to fear from this, but I want to see proper parity between different types of schools. So I would extend the powers of the local government ombudsman to investigate academies and free schools on admissions in the same way that they do for maintained schools. Parents should not have to write to the Secretary of State for Education to complain about an issue to do with their local school. They need a local voice. I think local authorities should have the power to direct all schools to admit hard-to-place children. So today, I focused on 3 main themes: freedom, devolution, and collaboration. The reason they matter is because the evidence shows us that done properly, they can help us to deliver high standards of education. The evidence shows us that these themes support teachers and school leaders in achieving a high quality of education. So yes, structures do matter, but they only matter because good structures are the servants of high standards. They are not an end in themselves. And the key focus, as we develop our policy from now through to 2015, will remain the one that I've sought over the last 18 months, which is a focus on how we raise the quality, morale, and status of our teaching profession, how we can attract the best people into teaching and then attract the best teachers and the best leaders to the most challenging schools, how we forge a modern curriculum that unleashes innovation, and of course, how we close the appalling attainment gap between rich and poor. No school left behind means that every school has a part to play in meeting these challenges. And I think that way, every child, whatever their background, will get the best possible start in life. Thank you very much.